Chapter 8, A Complete Change. Drip. Drip. Rinku hears the dripping of water and looks around hazily, attempting to locate where it's coming from. Using his hand he performed a transmutation on the area where the droplet came from. Progressing further and further in as he transmuted a little lightheaded. Mysteriously when he drank the liquid his mana returned and no matter how much transmuting he performed his mana did not run out. Rinku poured some of the water into his palm and gave it to the unconscious Ryuma. Rinku, come on. Rinku then repeatedly used his transmutation to find the source of the water. Eventually the amount of mysterious liquid increased and more trickling could be heard. Rinku had finally reached the source. Rinku, this is. An ore the size of a basketball emitting a light existed there. This ore was buried and assimilated with the surrounding rocks, and it dripped the liquid. A beautiful and mysterious stone. The ore was emitting darker blue than aquamarine, at least that was the best representation he could think of. Fascinated with the stone, Rinku reached out to touch it with his mouth. The dull pain and haze that his body and mind felt was cleared, and the fatigue disappeared. Seems like the liquid from this stone had saved him. The liquid seemed to hold restorative powers. It was time to give more of it to Ryuma. Rinku once more had a handful and gave it to Ryuma, helping it down his throat by rubbing his neck. Ryuma's eyes slowly opened back up as he sat up and looked at his surroundings before noticing the dropping of water on his head. Ryuma, what the hey rock. Ryuma then remembered the events that led up to him being where he was when he noticed his left arm. His childish demeanor slowly faded as he looked down. He noticed he had come back from the brink of death. Rinku, who was leaning on the wall, sagged down. Bringing up both knees, he placed his head between them while shivering from his close brush with death. He had no energy to even try to escape, his heart was broken. Rinku, someone, please, help us. Ryuma, no one is coming Rinku, you saw it too right, someone wanted us gone, so they aren't going to come down here and help us escape. Ryuma's eyes showed that of a broken soul, he truly has given up. Rinku, how did I end up like this? A question he asked himself over and over again. His mind had recovered from drinking the sacred water, even if he suffered from pain and hunger. Unfortunately, because he had a clear mind, all the suffering was clearly felt. Although he wished for death, a part of him still wanted to live. Conflicting thoughts alternated within his mind. He could no longer form any normal thoughts. His murmurs became incoherent and delirious. Abnormalities started to appear in Rinku's mind. Rinku, why do I have to suffer? What did I do? God unreasonably abducted me. A classmate betrayed me. Gradually his thoughts became darker. Who was wrong? Who forced their unreasonableness onto him? Who harmed him? Pain gradually turned into rage, rage led to hatred, he sought an enemy. Everything had worked to corrupt his spirit. The severe pain and starvation that wrecked his body, and the events that led him here into this endless darkness. Eventually Ryuma smacked the reality into Rinku. Ryuma, enough. Letting your darker thoughts take over isn't going to do anything but make it worse. Rinku looked at Ryuma at a loss of words, he was right. But Rinku didn't know what to do about it. It's not like either of them were strong enough to take on whatever was out there. At this moment, the mild and gentle, apologizing with a bitter smile at any sign of conflict, the Rinku that Kaori thought was strong, utterly fell from grace. A new version of Rinku Kagure came into existence. A Rinku that would ruthlessly eliminate any who stood in his way of survival. His broken heart broke again. This new heart however was not a weak heart that was roughly patched up. No, his new tough heart was reforged by the fires of agony, despair, and darkness. His eyes shined glaringly, his watery mouth needed to be wiped and his face broke out into a fearless grin. The canines in his warped mouth gained a glint. Certainly his expression had a sudden change, just like his thoughts. Rinku arose to proclaim a transmutation, and he muttered, "Rinku, kill." In the labyrinth there was a pack of two-tailed wolves. A pack of wolves usually consisted of 4 to 6 members. Because they were the weakest demon on this level, they compensated by cooperating in a group. The group Rinku saw was no exception. They totaled 4 in number. Cautiously, he observed his surroundings from his hiding spot near the wall and waited for the best hunting ground. The most fundamental hunting method was setting up an ambush. He let the wolves wander for a while until the perfect ambush site was discovered. This site had rocks covering the 4 corners. Now he waited for the prey to come. The moment one of them showed up, it was going to get butchered by being sandwiched by a rock and the wall. Rinku was practically salivating at the thought of his prey, until he felt something was off. Since their most important survival tool is their cooperation, they had an almost telepathic link with each other. Packmates would not be able to directly communicate with each other, but they would somehow know where each was and what they were doing. However, something was wrong. They were gathered into a group of 4, but somehow the leader could only sense 3 left among them. One of the wolves' signatures that was at the opposite side of the wall disappeared. It harbored doubts. When he put in the effort to rise from his prone position, it heard one of its packmates scream. Restlessness was conveyed from one wolf that was near the companion that disappeared. The comrade was caught and stuck between something and could not slip out. 2 wolves on the opposite side rushed up to rescue him. However, the sign of that struggling animal disappeared. Confused, it quickly went to the wall and checked the area, but nothing was there. The remaining 2 puzzled wolves used their noses to sniff around the area the 2 other wolves disappeared from to get a hint. At that moment, the ground depressed, and the walls protruded out to cover them. When they were about to jump aside, the depressed floor suddenly reverted back to its original state. This would make escaping the trap an easy task for the wolves. If it had not been confused with encountering such a new experience, they would not have been caught so easily. The assailant had already planned for their confusion and that single moment of hesitation. That was a good enough opportunity to catch them. Guru Yue. The 2 wolves screamed as the walls swallowed them, then nothing was left. Rinku was the one to catch all 4 of those wolves. Fighting back with determination, he was able to oppress his hunger and the pain throbbing throughout his body. The sacred water had sustained him so far. It was a good thing he trained earnestly repeatedly his transmuting and mana capacity. Ryuma looked on at what Rinku was doing. He chose not to follow him. Ryuma, you've changed. Rinku, changed. Rinku's transmutation has become more quick, more accurate, and more extensive now. He had accumulated training when he was in the room with the God's crystal. Rinku wanted to polish his weapon even if slightly, and of course his weapon was his transmutation. Even if it was possible for him to endure the pains, they still assaulted him. These pains were probably what made Rinku concentrate in such an extreme manner. This allowed him to perform several times faster than normal, and his transmuting range was 3 meters now. Of course he did not have an earth attribute magic that could be used offensively. He had a small container filled with sacred water and started to look for his enemies. Using his transmuting he was able to find the 4 wolves. Rinku decided to tail them. Many times he was almost found out, but he was able to lose their trail by hiding in spots he constructed with his transmuting. That was when he sprang his trap and using his transmuting he dragged them into the wall. Rinku, now what? My transmutation has no direct killing power. Both the speed and power of my transmuting did not seem to be enough to kill the demons. Ryuma watched Rinku more, as the words kept repeating in his mind, almost as if he was forgetting something important to him. Suddenly it hit him. Kaori, please, never change. Ryuma's eyes widened as he got up and rushed over to Rinku who had a malice grin on his face. Rinku, I wonder if I should suffocate them. Ryuma, now why would you do that when you have me here? Rinku looked up at Ryuma, that smile returning to his face as that brash, childlike persona returned to him, almost as if he regained his groove. Ryuma, hearing you say those words almost makes me think how Kaori would react, probably be very upset with you for breaking your promise to her. Ryuma knew what words to say to snap Rinku back to reality. Rinku's eyes widened as he remembered his promise. Ryuma, now let me take care of this, maybe get some food in the process. Ryuma walked towards the wolves as they jumped back and growled at him. Ryuma held up his index finger. Ryuma, reversal red. The force of the attack pushed the wolves against the rock wall continuously, crushing their bones and organs as they whelped in pain. Not a single bit of remorse shone on Ryuma's face. Eventually, they stopped struggling, dying from the force of the attack, blood pouring from their mouth and nose. Rinku looked on at Ryuma, still thinking about what he had just said to him. Ryuma hitting him over the head was what regained his composure. Ryuma, come on. We got food to eat. Chapter 9, The Birth of a Weapon. In the darkness, the light stones illuminate the surrounding area. The light projected a few shadows. One of the shadows provided a silhouette of someone crouching in front of a beast while chewing could be heard. Rinku, this seriously sucks. Ryuma, oh shut up and keep eating, it honestly ain't that bad. They duo began eating the wolf, its meat was tough, blood was dripping off as they took a bite from it. After eating so much of this meat that their belly swelled and drinking the sacred water that the Church of Saints would be envious of, an unusual phenomenon struck their bodies. Ah! Ugh! An intense pain suddenly wrecked their bodies. Erosion was the best word to describe the sensation that was going on. The pain only got worse as time passed on. Ryuma began thrashing on the grasping onto his face as blood began to spill from them. Rinku moved his hands out of there only to see his eyes almost popping out of his head, stained red from the blood. Rinku's body began to quake in pain, it was almost too much that he began to lose consciousness. With his trembling hands he took a flask out of his pocket and fed Ryuma the sacred water, however it only made things worse as both of Ryuma's eyes popped like a balloon. Blood splatting against the ground as he rolled over screaming in agony. Rinku's body began pulsating in pain, thump, thump, his body pulsed loudly, hard as a drum even. He screamed as he floundered on the ground. He banged his head repeatedly against the wall at the unending sight of his hell. Even if he wanted to die, there would be noon to grant his desire, so he had no choice but to endure it. Changes started to form on Rinku's body. First, his hair lost all color. Maybe because of a pain that broke his threshold, or another cause, his black hair turned white. Next, his muscles and skeleton started to thicken. Crimson lines started to emerge all over his body. When the pulsation stopped, Rinku went limp. Pure white was his hair color now, and crimson lines formed on his body. He was just like the monsters that plagued this level. Rinku's right hand twitched. The closed eyes were opened slightly. His unfocused eyes settled onto his right hand. Grasping his hand into a fist, he scratched along the ground. Rinku slowly clasped and unclasped his hand to prove he was still alive. When he finished checking if he had control of his body, he stood up slowly. He saw someone he did not recognize, this person had white hair and he was struggling to his feet. Rinku immediately went to a defensive position, seeing this stranger. The man turned around, his eyes were neon purple with multiple black rings surrounding his pupils. The man looked surprised to see Rinku. The man put two fingers up in a more offensive stance, this seemed to click something in Rinku's mind. Rinku, Ryuma. Ryuma stopped what he was doing and looked at Rinku. Ryuma, Rinku. Is that you? When did you get so fucking hot? Ryuma then went on to explain how Rinku had changed, his eye color turning red and his hair turning white. Ryuma mentioned that he looked like a vampire. As Rinku was processing what Ryuma had told him, he remembered something. Rinku, our status plates. Ryuma, our what? Exploring through his pockets, he searched for the forgotten status plate. Good thing he did not lose it. There on the plate was displayed Rinku's current condition. Maybe it would show if something was wrong with his body. Name, Rinku Kagure. Age, 17 years old. Class, Synergist. Level, 8. Strength, 100. Vitality, 300. Resistance, 100. Agility, 200. Magic power, 300. Magic resistance, 300. Skills. Transmutation, magic manipulation, iron stomach, lightning clad, predator, language comprehension. Rinku, I'm sorry what? All his stats had increased significantly, and he had 3 new skills. He couldn't believe it, and he was still just level 8. Levels were considered the amount of progression a person had. For Rinku, this meant he had a lot of potential to grow. Rinku, Ryuma, look for your status plate. You've gotta see this. Ryuma sighs before finding his status plate and handing it to Rinku. Name, Ryuma Najika. Age, 17 years old. Class, Sorcerer, Space. Level, 8. Strength, 350. Vitality, 500. Resistance, 10,000. Agility, 25. Magic power, 9999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999. Skills. Push, pull, blinding, complex magic resistance, illusion resistance, beyond complex magic, 6 paths, healing, projectile proficiency, complex magic combination, Rinnegan, language comprehension. Rinku almost choked on his saliva as he read his stats. He smacked the plate to see if it was broken, since Ryuma's stats were glitching off of his plate like it would in a video game. However, Rinku noticed his mana was slowly depleting, albeit you wouldn't tell by glazing over it. Rinku put his hand over Ryuma's eyes as he had a suspicion. Ryuma, hey, what the hell are you doing? Rinku, your eyes, Ryuma. Cover them. Ryuma, why, it's not like my eyes changed or anything. Ryuma then saw a reflection of his face and saw his newfound eyes and matching white hair to Rinku's. Ryuma, holy fuck. I'm drop dead gorgeous. Rinku looked at him deadpanned as he ripped off his tattered arm sleeve that used to cover up the arm that got torn off. He wrapped and tied it around Ryuma's head as Ryuma was left amazed. Ryuma, dude, you'll never believe this. I can still see you through the sleeve. Rinku was both amazed and perturbed by this. Ryuma's eyes seemed like a blessing and a curse. On one hand it gives him incredible power and strength, and on the other hand it is constantly draining his mana. Rinku once again looked down at his own stats. Rinku, magic manipulation? He wondered if he could directly control magic then. Rinku pondered if the earlier sensation he felt was magic. To verify his thoughts, he concentrated on attempting this magic manipulation. The crimson lines emerge again when Rinku concentrates on that sensation. He imagined an image where that sensation gathered into his right hand. Slowly the sensation returned and he could feel the movement of magic. When he attempted to raise his voice at the sensation, the magic started to gather around the magic formation on his glove. The surprised Rinku tried to transmute, and the ground rose easily. A few days have passed, and Rinku and Ryuma had both been training and honing their newfound abilities. Everything seemed to be going well for them, all of their skills were progressing at an incredible rate. Days later, Rinku finally completed working on a project he had been working on. With an attack that could exceed the speed of sound for a short distance, it was a modern weapon with great firepower. Overall length was 35 centimeters, it had a revolving magazine that held 6 bullets made from toru ore, the hardest known ore in this area. The barrel was elongated. Bullets were made using toru ore as the projectile and compressed powdered combustion stone was the propellant. Oversized revolver would accurately describe the firearm. The combustion stone was not the only explosive to propel the bullet. Using his lightning-clad skill, he could produce electromagnetic force to help accelerate the bullet, like a small rail gun. This equated to a power that was 10 times stronger than an antimatter rifle. He called it Donner. Chapter 10, The Sealed Room. Rinku and Ryuma had advanced 50 levels deeper into the dungeon, neither knew how much time they'd spent down there at this point. But the progress he was making was at an astonishing speed. Their current status. Name, Rinku Kagure. Age, 17 years old. Gender, male. Level, 49. Class, Synergist. Strength, 880. Vitality, 970. Resistance, 860. Agility, 1040. Magic, 760. Magic resistance, 760. Skills. Transmutation, mineral appraisal, precision transmutation, mineral inquiry, magic sensory, predator, mineral separation, mineral fusion, replica transmutation, magic manipulation, iron stomach, lightning clad, divine step, air walk, flicker, grand legs, air claws, night vision, far vision. Perception, magic perception, hide presence, poison resist, paralysis resist, petrification resistance, language comprehension. Name, Ryuma Najika. Age, 17 years old. Gender, male. Level, 49. Class, sorcerer, space. Strength, 1000. Vitality, 950. Resistance, 50,000. Agility, 300. Magic, error. Magic resistance, error. Skills. Push, pull, erasure, flash, blinding, beyond complex magic proficiency, healing, martial arts proficiency, space manipulation, projectile proficiency, afterimage, familiar summoning, resurrection, Ghetto Mazo summoning, necromancy, Renegan, magic absorption, magic resistance, magic manipulation. Barrier magic, teleportation, magic sight, physical enhancement, magical barrier removal, illusion magic, remote control, 6 paths, language comprehension. The duo were inside a base that Rinku had created for them at the 50th level. Rinku was stacking up his training for his transmutation, firearms, and the like. Ryuma, on the other hand, wasn't doing anything. He instead had found both the stairs to the next level as well as a foreign location on this level. The space around the area was eerie. At the end of the side area was a solemn majestic double door about 3 m in height. On the flanks of the doors were 2 one-eyed giant sculptures enshrined into the walls, only their upper bodies were sculpted it seemed. Chills ran down Rinku's spine the moment he set foot there. Rinku was feeling expectation and unpleasantness at the same time. If he opened the door, he was sure that a disaster was waiting to meet them. However, a new wind blew into this dungeon. Rinku, Ryuma, you remember our goal, right? Ryuma, oh how could I forget? I want to go home as much as you do, my guy. Rinku smirked. Rinku, good. They then advanced to the door. It was decorated in gorgeous detail. Rinku pushed open the door with a twinkle in his eye. He cautiously and quietly opened the door. However, Ryuma, yo. Anyone in here? This caught Rinku off guard as he almost fell over in shock. Rinku, Ryuma, are you fucking stupid? What if this is all a trap? Ryuma, oh well. Rinku then proceeded to lay out the details of the room one by one. 2 columns of pillars lined up all the way into the depths. The room was made from finely crafted marbles and it looked similar to the church room they were first summoned into. In the center of the room was a huge cube of stone that reflected the incoming light and lustered. Rinku was staring at this cube-like object. He noticed that something was growing in the front center of the cube. Trying to confirm what he saw, Rinku pushed open the door and checked the vicinity. Like a horror film, the door would slam closed when you were in trouble. However, before Rinku could fix the open door, it moved. Who? A husky voice belonging to a frail girl. Rinku and Ryuma stared at the center of the room in surprise. The early growing was now moving. With the light finally piercing the darkness, the identity of it was exposed. Humans. The growing was a person. Only the face could be seen, every other part was buried in the cube. Long blonde hair hung down around the woman, like a ghost from a certain horror film. Pupils of red were peeping from the gaps of hair, just like a low-altitude moon. From her looks, she looked around 12 to 13 years old. The dangled hair looked haggard, but it still had a beautiful appearance. The red eyes were staring at the duo, almost as if they were asking for help. Chapter 11, We're No Heroes. Ryuma, sorry. Wrong room. As Ryuma said that, Rink began to close the door. The blonde-haired girl began to panic and tried to stop them. Her voice hadn't been used for years, so it got blurred into a mutter. Despite this, her desperation was conveyed. Please, save me. Rinku, nope. Ryuma, oh aren't you the tough guy today? Why? I promise. I'll do anything. The girl was desperate. Only the head was seen, but her face was enough to transmit her feelings. Rinku responded in a gloomy manner. Rinku, there's a reason you're locked up down here, only an idiot would free you without a good enough reason. Rinku was no longer a normal person who would respond so hastily to someone pleading for help. His original self would have helped her without a second's hesitation. No. Please. I'm not bad. I was. Rinku continued to close the door behind him. Moments before he closed the door, he heard. I was betrayed. Rinku and Ryuma both stopped, frozen, the door only having a small crack in it. 10 seconds pass, then 20, then 30. Finally the door started to open up again. The duo stood at the doorway with a soured expression. Rinku, you said you were betrayed? For some reason, I can't help but to not believe you. But if what you said is true, why were you sealed in her by your betrayer? The girl was stunned when they came back. Through her dirty blonde hair, her red eyes stared at the two. Rinku became irritated with the lack of a response. Rinku, if you're not going to talk, then we're leaving. Rinku began to walk away, but Ryuma grabbed his shirt tightly, stopping him as he looked back. I'm a vampire. I was granted great power. I worked hard for my country because of it, but, one day, my uncle became king. He considered me a threat because of my power, and since he couldn't kill me, he sealed me down here. Rinku and Ryuma looked at her as they were lost in their thoughts, and she continued to plead with them. Please, help me. Rinku then rubbed his head and placed his hand on the cube that was sealing the girl. She noticed the meaning behind it and her eyes widened. Ryuma, get ready, cause this is gonna be fun. Ryuma smiled at her as Rinku began to use his transmutation ability on the cube. However, the cube was resisting Rinku's transmutation. It was exactly like the bedrock at the top and bottom of a level. The cube was not completely immune to it. Little by little, Rinku's magic started to erode areas around the cube. Rinku began exerting more and more magic until the cube's defenses were penetrated. Sweat started to drip from his brow. This was his first time using so much magic in one go. If his control slipped for just a moment, then his power would go on a rampage. Even with all this power, the cube did not deform. Rinku was desperate. He had released all his magic. Ryuma watched on with a smile as Rinku struggled. He knew why Rinku was going through so much trouble, to help someone who was also betrayed, especially since they themselves knew the feeling, and experienced it recently. The cube around the girl started to melt, and little by little, she was being released from her shackles. Soon, more and more parts of her got free. Her swollen chest came to bare, then her waist, arms, and thighs. Under those cubes, she was wearing nothing. Even though her body was emaciated, she still had a mystique of beauty to her. She dropped into a childish seat after all her body was set free. Her body seemed to lack the energy to stand up. Rinku sat down from exhaustion, his breath huffed and puffed. A heavy sense of fatigue hit him when he felt his empty magical reserves. With his wild breath and shivering hands he reached for his potion, but the girl clenched his hand. A hand that lacked any power, small and trembling. When Rinku glanced at her, she was staring at him. Her face was in an expressionless state, but her eyes told the real story. Ryuma, well, it seems you two are getting along quite well already. Ryuma loudly exclaimed as the two blushed and looked away from each other. The girl spoke up, however, her tone was exhausted, flustered, as well as trembling. Thank you. Rinku pulled out a potion and began to drink out, returning his glance to her once he finished it. What's your name? She asked with a whisper. Rinku realized they had not introduced themselves. Rinku, I'm Rinku, and the loud mouth behind me is Ryuma. Ryuma, the one and only. She muttered those names repeatedly, as if she was etching them into her mind as something important. Rinku, what's your name? Give me one. I don't need my previous name anymore, the one Rinku and Ryuma grants me is good. Ryuma, well, I fold, I am terrible with names. This is all yours, lover boy. Rinku glared at Ryuma as he scratched his head while the girl's eyes were shining with anticipation. Rinku, how about you? You, yes, from now on I'm you. Thank you. Ryuma, well, for the time being. Ryuma took off his black overcoat and tossed it on top of you. Ryuma, wear that, you can't stay in the nude forever, you'll be a big distraction for Rinku. You reflexively took the offered overcoat while she looked at her state. She was really stark naked. All of her important parts were completely exposed. Ryuma's overcoat was quickly wrapped around her, while she turned bright red. You looked up at Rinku and murmured. So Rinku's a pervert. Rinku decided to stay silent. He knew no matter what he said, he knew it would only make it worse. However, he did give a menacing glare to Ryuma, who responded with a thumbs up. Suddenly Rinku felt a presence nearby. Rinku, above us. When Rinku noticed its presence, that was the moment it dropped from the ceiling. Ryuma jumped in front of Rinku, who had grabbed you, and jumped out of harm's way. Ryuma placed two of his fingers up, forming a red ball at the tips. Ryuma, reversal red. The monster was vaporized from the force of the push of Ryuma's attack, blood starting to rain down on the trio as Ryuma smiled valiantly. You looked shocked at the power of Ryuma. Never in her life has she seen a human possess such abilities. Especially to take down a monster of that size and strength with a single attack. Rinku shielded you from the blood raining down on them. he smiled as he saw the massive increase in strength Ryuma received during the time down here.